What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Must start and avoid running backs for week 14. As I mentioned yesterday, this is the first week of the fantasy playoffs, so I'm going to be a little bit more picky when talking about players to start and sit, because not only are there no teams on bye, but only the top half of teams in general, sometimes it's top like 60%, but in general, top half of teams made the playoffs. So you really shouldn't be relying on fringe players at this point. So let's start things off with the Thursday night game, which features the Cowboys at the Bears. This game has a 43-point total, and the Cowboys are 2.5-point road favorites. For the Cowboys, always start Zeke. This is a tough matchup for him, but the Bears have been beat on the ground at times this season, so it's a matchup he can definitely win. For the Bears, Cohen just isn't getting enough volume to trust outside of deeper full PPR leagues, so I'd leave him on the bench. And as for Montgomery, Dallas has a league average defense, not elite, not really bad, just about league average. So we know he's going to get around his 15 carries, around 2 to 3 targets, and all of the goal line work. And that's worth starting as, say, a low-end running back 2 to a flex play. I'm not upset if I have him in the running back 2 spot. I would prefer if I had him more as a flex, and it'd be great if you had multiple guys that are better than him. But this game should remain competitive, and they're at home, so I'm definitely not concerned about starting him in the running back 2 or flex spot. Panthers at Falcons is the next one, and this is actually one of the higher total games in the week at 48 points, and the Falcons are 3-point home favorites. For the Panthers, always start McCaffrey. For the Falcons, Freeman played on 67% of snaps last week, and he was given 21 touches. So given the lack of talent behind him on the depth chart in this backfield, we should expect a similar workload moving forward. The Panthers are a top 5 matchup for running backs, so Freeman should be considered a solid running back 2 this week. Colts at Bucks is next, and this one has a 47.5-point total, and the Bucks are 3-point home favorites. For the Colts, Jonathan Williams was given just 9 touches on just 22% of snaps last week, and Wilkins had 13 touches on 44% of snaps, then Hines had 6 touches on 43% of snaps. Given the split and given the matchup with Tampa Bay, remember, one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult, running back matchups, I would just stay away from this entire backfield. For Tampa Bay, we saw for the 5th or 6th time this season why we cannot trust this backfield. It was a great matchup for the ground game, and yet they decided to give Peyton Barber his highly inefficient 17 touches, averaging 1.7 yards per carry if you remove his 15-yard touchdown early in the game. Barber remains extremely inefficient and is just no threat in the receiving game. And remember, we can never assume rational coaching on bad teams. So you cannot look at their backfield and ever give it any sort of confidence. So I'm staying away basically for the rest of the season on this backfield. But if you made the playoffs, I highly doubt it was riding Ronald Jones or Peyton Barber. So it shouldn't really affect very many people. Dolphins at Jets is the next one, and this game has a 44-point total, and the Jets are 5.5-point home favorites. For the Dolphins, Balaj suffered a potentially serious leg injury. We don't know exactly how bad it is, but we're not really expecting him to return this week, and it's not like we were starting him anyways, so it doesn't matter all that much for fantasy. This backfield will likely be down to Laird and Gaskins, with Laird being viable in like 16-team full PPR leagues. But other than that, let's be honest, it's a similar situation with Washington. It's not like you were relying on the Dolphins backfield to make it to the playoffs, so why start now? For the Jets, Miami is obviously a great matchup for any position, and especially the running back, since a lot of teams are favorites when they play the Dolphins. You should be able to start Bell as, I'll say, a low-end running back 1 this week. He's not getting as many snaps, as much of a workload as he was in the beginning of the season. But like I said, it's the Dolphins. Really good matchup, so you're starting him. 49ers at Saints is the next one, and this should be a really good game. Total is set at 48 points, and the Saints are 3-point home favorites. For the 49ers, a lot depends on the health of Breida. They've indicated that he's expected to return this week, and if that happens, then I'd likely just avoid this entire backfield. Mostert may have passed Coleman, honestly, last week on the depth chart, but there's no way we're going to get a clear indication of what they want to do this week. The most likely scenario is that Breida returns. He gets a lot of work between the 20s, kind of splits with Coleman and Mostert. They're using Mostert and Coleman near the red zone as a split, and that's just a complete mess, especially against a Saints defense on the road as underdogs, and the Saints are really, really good against the run. 7th in rush defense DVOA, 3rd fewest yards per carry allowed. So this is not an ideal spot when you have 3 running backs splitting the workload. If Breida is out again, then honestly, it's really tough to trust Coleman or Mostert since we don't know what the split will be. If we get a good indication that they're going to go with one of the two, then I can change that take and I'll adjust the rankings. But honestly, I do expect Breida to return, and so I would probably just avoid all of them. For the Saints, always start Alvin Kamara, especially as a home favorite, and Latavius Murray remains a guy to keep on the bench. Lions at Vikings is next, and this game has a 42.5 point total, with Minnesota a massive 13.5 point home favorite. I know the Lions are really bad, but 13.5 is definitely a bigger spread than I was anticipating. For the Lions, even in 3 straight losses, Bo Scarborough has been getting massive volume on the ground, and yet he still hasn't been worth starting in half and full PPR leagues. He has just 1 target over his 3 games, and that's going to continue moving forward. He's a very touchdown-dependent running back, and as a road dog against the Vikings defense that ranks 4th in rush defense DVOA and 5th in yards per carry allowed, I would continue to keep him on the bench, and no other running back is worth considering in this backfield. For the Vikings, we saw the potential value in having Alexander Mattison on Monday night. Dalvin Cook left the game with an injury, and Mattison looked great in place of him. Obviously, we'll just need to wait and see on the status of Dalvin Cook, but from what I've read, the injury does seem minor. Assuming that he plays and it doesn't look like he's going to be overly limited, then I would continue to start Dalvin Cook. If Cook happens to be out, then you should start Mattison in place of him. This is a 1 o'clock game, so we're going to know the exact status before lock, and I'm sure you own Mattison if you have Dalvin Cook, since I've told you that it's a must every week this season. Broncos at Texans is the next game we'll go over, and this one has a pretty low 41.5 point total. Might be the lowest on the week, although I think there might be a game at 40 or 40.5. And the Texans are 9.5 point home favorites. For the Broncos, Locke definitely breathes some light into this offense, and the running backs are going to benefit as a result. Freeman continues to outsnap Lindsey, and yet Lindsey continues to get more work than Freeman. It's a really strange setup that they have going on, and I really don't understand why they won't just shift 60% of the snaps over to Lindsey and give the other 40% to Freeman, since that's kind of what the volume split is. I don't really know why you'd have Freeman on the field a ton and just not be using him, and then pull in Lindsey and basically always use him when he's on the field. It just doesn't make much sense. But again, like I always say, never assume irrational coaching on bad teams. You cannot start Freeman since you can't really trust the guy who hasn't been over 8 carries since October, and I wouldn't expect that to all of a sudden change this week. You can start Lindsey as a running back too, though. The implied total is gross, so don't expect them to score all that many points, so his touchdown upside is definitely low, but he's getting enough total volume to be a solid running back too. For the Texans, even as home favorites, I don't see how you could trust Carlos Hyde. He has 2 receptions over his last 8 weeks, and he's not getting the same volume on the ground that he once was. You can't start Duke Johnson either. I mean, they've used him more in the receiving game at points this season. They used him a decent amount last week, but you can't just assume that's going to continue this week. They could very well go back to 1, 2, 3 targets on him, and there's no way I'm trusting him in the playoffs. Ravens at Bills is next, and this should be a really fun game to watch. The Ravens are definitely the better team. That's not really a question, but it's always tough to play in Buffalo. And also, if the Bills win this game and the Patriots lose to the Chiefs, then the Bills will be tied for first in the AFC, and they will hold the tiebreaker over the Ravens, which is, of course, what everyone thought was going to happen to start the season, right? We all knew the Bills were going to be tied for first in the AFC. For the Ravens, you can basically just play any of my Ravens breakdowns, and it's going to be the exact same thing this week. Ingram's the only back you can trust, and he's a touchdown-dependent running back too. For the Bills, even with Gore getting his 10 inefficient carries each week, Singletary's still playing between 70 and 80% of the snaps, and he's getting enough work to be considered a running back too. This is not a good matchup, but the Bills always seem to play better at home, and I would honestly trust starting him as a running back too this week in a game where he could see 80+% of the snaps. Next, we have a very uninspiring matchup between the Bengals and the Browns. So actually, this one is going to be the lowest total in the week, 40.5 projected points, with the Browns 8.5 point home favorites. That is not giving the Bengals very many projected points. For those Bengals, Mixon, he gets enough work to be viewed as like a low-end running back too to flex play. His receiving game work gives him a nice little bump, but it's also a little bit unpredictable. He should be in that like 15 to 20 touch range, making him okay to start as a running back too, but it's definitely a low-end one, and like I said, lowest total game in the week, and the Bengals are massive road underdogs. It's just not a situation you typically want a running back from, so if you can go with someone else, I would. For the Browns, always start Nick Chubb, especially against the Bengals since they're a top 5 running back matchup and he's a home favorite. Kareem Hunt is flex viable this week. He's not going to get any more than like 10, 11 carries, but he's getting involved in the receiving game and they should score a few touchdowns, and he's been involved in the red zone as well. So I wouldn't say I'm extremely confident in playing him, but he's definitely not a bad play. Next, we have Washington at Green Bay, and this one has a 42.5 point over-under, and the Packers are 13.5 point home favorites. For Washington, Geis has been getting around 10 to 13 touches per game when healthy, and we could see that rise to maybe 13 or 15 a week to close the season. The Packers are a below-average run defense, so this is a winnable matchup for Darius Geis. The issue is that they're 2 touchdown road underdogs, and Chris Thompson is back now. So Geis can be used in the flex for his upside, but I would definitely not feel great about that, and I definitely wouldn't use either Peterson or Thompson. So it's kind of a similar situation to other running backs where I've said they're fine, but it's unlikely you rode that running back into the playoffs, so why start them now ahead of the guys who got you there? For the Packers, Aaron Jones continues to see around 12 carries with a minimal role in the receiving game. Jamal Williams has been getting the exact same amount of work and has actually been more productive. Jones is still who they lean on in the green zone, so he has more weekly upside, but the split is a lot closer than people think. This week, you can start both of them. Washington is a really bad defense, and like I said, the Packers are 2 touchdown home favorites. This is a dream matchup for a running back, so I do have Jones ranked as a low-end running back 1 because, like I said, they prefer to use him a little bit more when they get close to the end zone, so he's got a little bit more touchdown upside. And then Williams is more of a mid to low-end running back 2, but definitely a guy I'd feel comfortable starting, again, since he's getting the exact same amount of work as Aaron Jones, and this is a great matchup. Chargers at Jaguars is the next game, and this one is a 43.5 point total, and the Chargers are 3-point road favorites. For the Chargers, Melvin Gordon should be considered a low-end running back 1 this week, with Eckler as more of a low-end running back 2, and definitely better in half and then full PPR leagues being the best. The Jaguars defense has taken a massive step back lately, and their run defense has just been dreadful. They now rank dead last in rush defense DVOA and 28th in yards per carry allowed. So if Gordon's going to keep seeing his 20 touches and Eckler's going to remain heavily involved in the receiving game, then I trust these guys in my lineup in the playoffs. For the Jaguars, always start Leonard Fournette, especially considering he has 25 receptions over his last 3 weeks. Next, we have Steelers at Cardinals, and this game has a 43.5 point total, and the Steelers are 2.5 point road favorites. For the Steelers, everything depends on James Conner. If he returns and he's not going to be limited, then you should play him. If he's out, then you can start Benny Snell in the flex. He's still going to be very touchdown dependent since he's really not being involved in the receiving game, and he's only getting around half the snaps. But this is a good matchup, so you can play him in the flex again if James Conner is out, and I would not play Jalen Samuels. For the Cardinals, at this point, I don't trust anyone in the backfield, especially if they start to mix in Chase Edmonds, because he was active last week, but he didn't really see the field. So if they get him involved, plus they have David Johnson a little bit, plus they have Kenyon Drake, then honestly, you just can't trust any of them because it's not like this is a powerhouse offense, and the Steelers have a pretty good defense. So if all of them are active, I'm probably not starting anyone. Next, we have Titans at Raiders, and this one has a 47.5 point total with the Titans 3-point road favorites. Their record is very surprising. They've been playing a lot better as of late with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, and honestly, this game is really easy to break down. Always start Derrick Henry and always start Josh Jacobs. Chiefs at Patriots is next, and this one should be a really good game. Both teams are dealing with some injuries, but this matchup hasn't disappointed yet, so I don't expect either team to just run away with this game. Should be a high-scoring game, should be fun to watch, should be definitely a close one. 48.5 point total, Patriots 3-point home favorites. For Kansas City, a lot depends on the health of Damian Williams. If he's active without any limitations, then he should be considered a flex play against New England. If he's out though, then Darwin Thompson could be viable in the flex. My issue with Darwin is that we can't know for sure they're going to give him a ton of touches like they did last week in a blowout. Like, that game wasn't close at all. And so if we fast forward to New England game, we can't be sure that they're going to give him the exact same workload. McCoy is still going to be there to take work away, and it's not a good matchup. The Patriots have a really good defense, especially when they play at home. So I think Darwin will still be someone you want to keep on your bench, but he's viable if you really need him and Damian is out. I didn't mention Darrell Williams because I don't expect him to play. He could be done for the season, but we're just going to have to see what they report. And then you have LaShawn McCoy, who I probably wouldn't use either. You're definitely going to need him to score a touchdown to be worth it, since they are trying to limit his workload down the stretch of the season. But if you really need someone, you squeaked into the playoffs, you got to have someone in the flex. It's not a horrible play. It's just not one I would prefer to make. For the Patriots, this might be the first time in a while you can actually start Sony Michel. It would be more as a low-end running back 2 or a flex play, but Kansas City ranks 30th in rush defense DVOA and 30th in yards per carry allowed. Plus, he's a home favorite running back and he gets almost all of the goal line work. James White is also a good start as a running back 2 or a flex play. He's finally not getting extremely unlucky with touchdowns, and we all know his reception ceiling in high-scoring games. The Sunday night game will be Seahawks at Rams, and this should be another really good game, especially if we can get good Jared Goff to show up in this one. The total has risen to 47.5 points, and Seattle is a 1-point road favorite, but both teams are negative in the money line, so it's essentially a pick'em. For Seattle, Carson's fumbling has opened the door for Penny to see more touches, and he's responded well to the increase in volume. 2 weeks ago, he posted a 14 for 129 and 1 stat line, and then this past week, he turned 15 carries into 74 yards and a score, while adding 33 yards and another touchdown on 4 receptions. Carson is still the lead back, and he should get more carries as a result, but Penny is being used late in games. He's being used more in the receiving game, so It's a pretty tough situation to try and guess on. There is enough volume for them to both be viable, but it definitely lowers the floor and the ceiling on both of them if they're both being used. As of right now, I have Carson as a running back 2 and Penny as a flex play, but that could change if we get more news on the split moving forward. For the Rams, Gurley will continue to be a touchdown-dependent running back 2, at least until they decide to increase his role in the receiving game, which is not something I expect to happen during the regular season. The final game of the week is Monday Night Football featuring the Giants at the Eagles. This game has a 47-point total, and the Eagles are 8-point home favorites. For the Giants, it's been a rough season for Saquon, but you have to start him in any matchup. For the Eagles, we'll need to see if Jordan Howard is cleared for contact this week. If he's out again, then Sanders should be viewed as a running back 2. If Howard is active, then we'll need to see how limited he's going to be, and I'll adjust the rankings accordingly. Without knowing how many snaps they expect him to get, it's impossible to know where he and Sanders should be ranked. So, that's everything you should need answered at the running back position for the first week of the playoffs. If I have not answered your question in this video, then just look at my rankings at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button? And if you're new here, how about subscribing to the channel? But thanks for watching.